if it weren't for Elon Musk, you'd have had to invent him, because there's no one who's more hated on YouTube than Elon Musk.
Even gaming YouTubers that I follow will randomly trash the guy. And it's like, guys, a year ago you were praising him. You were saying he's a genius. He's a Leonardo da Vinci of our times. And I agree that's probably the case. And yet now, because the meme is to hate Elon Musk, he's worse than Hitler.
Hey, Culminators. Today I am going to be speaking with one of the most, how shall I put it, polarizing people on the internet. And if I didn't know what everybody else thought about him, not everybody else, but a lot of people who don't like Ian Miles Cheong, I wouldn't know that. I followed him for years. He's followed me for years. I always thought his takes were interesting and insightful, and his background is different from mine, but I'm going to let him do the talking. I'm going to let him explain how he managed to make so many enemies, and why, when I listen to these stories that these people tell about how much they hate him, I'm having a great deal of trouble finding the there. So maybe Ian will figure it out for us. Ian, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm good. How are you?
You were telling me just before we started recording that you were in the middle of another exciting episode of Twitter Files.
That is correct. Yep.
And
Lee Fang dropped Pfizer Files. Yeah.
The Pfizer Files. All right. By the time we drop this, I guess
people will know about it.
Everyone's going to know about it. But I guess I don't want to, talk about old news. But it is. Were you you seem to have very well. How shall I put this? Let's talk first about who you are, to those who don't know who you are. Sure. Even though you're like one of these internet personalities, but your background is as a gaming journalist, right?
Originally a decade ago. Yeah. And then I got into real journalism. I started working for News Corp at a site called Heat Street. It was run by News Corp. So, Fox News, they would always repurpose the articles I wrote for them. It was a more culture-related website. Pretty good staff apart from Louise Mensch. I'm sure you're all familiar with who Louise Mensch is.
She's the one with that special relationship with the Marshal of the Supreme Court, as I recall.
That is correct. Yeah, the ones who are going to condemn Trump to death or something. Yeah.
But I guess your time in the gaming world probably had something to do with putting a mark on your back, right? Because you are a Gamergate figure.
A figure of it, yeah. But people don't seem to understand where I was during that time. They seem to think that, if you're on the left, you'll be of the opinion, and this is an incorrect opinion, that I was in charge of Gamergate or that I was a big proponent of it. In fact, I wasn't. I was actually on the other side, the social justice side, what we would now refer to as the woke side. And that's because game journalism, like every other media industry, is completely dominated by the left. And so even if you were, center-leaning, I would say I was center-leaning at the time, it was hard to escape that. And when you see your quote-unquote friends, be attacked by a group of people for whatever reason, right, you tend to want to defend them. Now, obviously, later on, we discovered, pretty early on, actually, not later on, was that the censorship was to simply stop the criticism of anyone in the game industry, at least certain people, the woke people in the gaming industry. They were using censorship as a means to stop people from criticizing them. And that is what became Gamergate. So that's a pretty brief overview of Gamergate. There's a lot more to go into it, but it's not really that interesting.
Well, the core of Gamergate, though, right, of all the woke issues, wasn't feminism, wasn't treatment of women, the hot button.
That was how they painted it, right? That was how the woke people painted it. They said that this was gamers fighting back against feminists and seeing, women have representation in video games and in the media. But that was, that's just gaslighting, right? That's not what it was. There were a lot of Gamergate supporters were women, and women have had a lot of representation in the video game industry. That is without a doubt true, right? All you have to do is look back at Lara Croft, for instance, very popular game in the 90s. Main female character, women were celebrated. If anything, gamers, being predominantly male at the time, wanted to have more women in the industry. The issue was that a few social justice activists, what we would call woke people nowadays, were trying to inject their politics into video games, putting the DEI, CRT stuff into video games, and people were taking issue with it. They were like, so these guys are getting special favors from gaming journalists who were giving them special platforms, extra coverage, all this done behind the scenes. So there were a lot of personal relationships being built between games journalists, entertainment media journalists, with the social justice activists. So it wasn't women in gaming being attacked. It was more like a criticism of specific journalists, in particular Gawker, right? Gawker at the time, before Hulk Hogan destroyed it, was a big proponent of this. This was I would say the vector of attack from the gamers was towards organizations like that were promoting a specific narrative.
Now, again, one of the things I try to do on this podcast is to get a little sense of who people are and how they got, we have these jobs and these descriptions of what or who a person is or what he does that are, besides being often oversimplifications, many of them are categories that simply didn't exist when I was your age, much less, 30, 40 years ago. And my audience is a little bit older probably than some other possible audiences in the world. You live in Malaysia.
Yeah.
You've spent your entire life in Malaysia.
Almost my entire life. I have moved around a bit, but yeah, mostly.
And yet you have become this internet personality obviously you speak perfect English.
Yes.
Do most people in Malaysia speak perfect English?
No. They sound nothing like me.
So how is it that you have such a good English?
I grew up on the internet. That's how.
That's amazing to me. That's actually what I thought the answer was, but it's astonishing. Because when you think about how, before the internet, you might have said, English was becoming this sort of global language, and yet you might have wondered whether American influence was going to always be as great as it is.
And it certainly is. They built the internet.
Well, the internet, if there was ever any question about that, the internet seemed to have really sealed that. So you got into gaming and then started writing about gaming?
I would say, like any teenager, I was a teenager in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I was a teenager. I got into video games like any other male, right? Any other guy that age. But I got into it through writing. I used to write about video games, like, video game reviews, that sort of thing. And it was mostly my passion for the hobby. I like playing video games. I don't play it as much as I want to nowadays. I just don't have the time for it. I wish I had the time for it. I still keep up to date with it. I still keep in touch with it. But yeah, I got into writing as a result of, reading a lot of books, like reading history books, fantasy novels, that sort of thing, like Lord of the Rings, for example, or Dune. Actually, Dune's a better example. I haven't really finished Lord of the Rings. It's kind of a boring book.
It always looked like one to me. But
it's way too long.
Well, I never really appreciated the fantasy genre. I have enough trouble with reality, with the impossibility of reality that we're living through right now.
Science fiction is way more interesting, right? It's more speculative fiction. It's like my favorite genres would be just cyberpunk stuff, like Neuromancer, things that are now reality.
Well, the cool thing about science fiction is that partially because of Asimov's influence, but in general because of the people who were attracted to it as the genre developed, that there are conventions, there are rules, and
yes,
no one has to follow them, but there's an understanding that we're here to have an intelligent literary conversation.
That's right.
Not, to the extent, for example, that Harry Potter isn't.
Right, it's just magic can randomly save the day, right? That's the problem with a lot of...
But also things, powers that don't exist, that existed.
It's unrealistic.
Yeah,
it's just nonsense. It's not, it's not even speculative, right? It's like... Right. The only time it's interesting it's when you have something like A Song of Ice and Fire, what people call Game of Thrones nowadays. That was the first book, right? That's interesting because it's more grounded in reality. The politics of it matter, the personalities matter more so than the use of magic. There's not very much magic at all, like, apart from the dragons. Like that's it. That's like the only fantasy element of those books, really. I mean, there's obviously smaller instances, but with speculative fiction, something that is set in, say, 20 years from now, or even 1,000 years from now, it's always grounded in a certain kind of reality. And yes, there are exceptions like Star Wars. I would not consider that to be science fiction. That's more fantasy with a science fiction flair to it, right? Like laser swords or whatever, but none of it's realistic. They use the Force. That's nonsense, right?
Right. It's also, it's remarkably inconsistent. What does it do? How do you, is it a religion?
We don't know, right? It changes depending on who's writing it. Yeah.
So, okay, rabbit hole that we don't really want to go down any deeper than we already have. So, nonetheless, even though you had this sort of social justice warrior, as they used to say, profile during the Gamergate magic, you end up getting picked up by Murdoch.
Right, because you could say I switched sites, and some people say, and this tends to happen sometimes with some YouTubers. People say, oh, they just switch sides overnight, and that is true with some people. They are simply looking for the best way they can make money, right? Like, oh, if they failed on the left, they're going to try on the right, and we see this all the time. For example, Andrew Tate. People like to cite him as this based dude who's fighting against the Matrix or whatever. But the reality is that the guy's a pimp. I mean, regardless of whether the charges against him are real, the guy's a pimp. That was how he branded himself originally. And he sort of inserted himself into the right because he saw that there was a potential audience there, in the whole masculinity thing and traditional masculinity, although nothing that he teaches is traditional masculinity. I mean, traditional masculinity doesn't tell you to go beat your wife, or treat her like crap, or, silence women, or have multiple kids with multiple people that you don't even see. Like that's just ridiculous, right? That's not even masculinity. And yet, there are people like that.
It's actually
right.
Adolescence.
It's adolescence. Yeah, teenager might do that. And that's like a teenager's idea of what masculinity is, but not to, the point isn't like to bring him up as to attack him or anything. I'm just using him as an example of someone who, might say switch sides or become political for whatever reason, because he's canceled on the left, obviously. And I don't think most people on the right are even on board with him. So I'm not one of those types of people. For me personally, it was more like, I've always been like a staunch capitalist. I always believed in meritocracy, in equality, not equity, but equality, the equality of opportunity to give, if you deserve a job. I mean, if you're good at a job, you deserve it. Like, I don't care what race you are, what sex you are, your preferences are. None of that should matter, right? If you can do a job, you're good at it. What I took issue with on the social justice left is like, I'm on board with like, don't harass women or something. Like, that's how they paint their movement, right? They say it's all about being nice to people. And I think most liberals, I wouldn't call myself a liberal. I would definitely call myself a post-liberal or conservative nowadays, right? But at the time, it's easy to fall into that category or that, that group when all your friends are doing it. You're trying to stop harassment. You see, like malicious actors going around doing bad stuff. But I couldn't stomach the rest of what they were selling, right? They were selling Marxism. They were selling, DEI, things like critical race theory, which is completely racist, things like that, right? And the whole trans movement became a thing. Nowadays, that's a much bigger thing than it used to be. And I used to always, pick apart what I saw on Tumblr. I would call it out. I'd be like, okay, these people are demanding that we use their non-binary bun/bun self pronouns. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, we got to call this out because this is becoming like the norm on our side. And, eventually I was just calling these things out and I felt stifled. Like, I couldn't criticize my peers in the entertainment industry because they started going down this rabbit hole of insanity, of this woke insanity. I'd say something and immediately get like almost canceled for it. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. Like, this is insane. I want to be able to speak out. I want to, depoliticize myself, like disentangle myself from this leftist politics and just, be an entertainment journalist. That was my plan originally. And that was probably my first pitch to the Murdoch enterprise, so to News Corp. One of my first few articles was about disentangling entertainment from politics. And I think that's what a lot of people on the right want. A lot of libertarians certainly want that. And by doing so, by disentangling myself, I found myself talking to a lot of conservatives, a lot of disaffected liberals, people like Carl Benjamin is a YouTuber, right? A great YouTuber. You might know him as Sargon of Akkad, recently unbanned by Elon Musk. He's back on Twitter, and he's fighting the good fight. At the time when I disentangled myself from the left, he was perhaps the first person to actually to welcome me with open arms. He was like, guys, give Ian a chance. Listen to him. I mean, what he's saying actually makes a lot of sense, and we don't want to, disenfranchise him or make him feel like he's ostracized or he's alienated. And I started talking to guys like him, talking to people on the right, whether they were in politics or culture or entertainment. There were other disaffected games journalists like myself at the time. Talking to these people, just simply opening a dialogue publicly with them, caused my DMs to be completely inundated with leftists, people who who ostensibly called me their friends, were attacking me in private and then publicly. They're like, Ian cannot be trusted. He's a right-wing shill. He's actually a fascist, and that I've always known him to be a fascist all along. They just went down that path. It's impossible.
So, since we're there now, let's talk about that. I mean, I know a lot of people, and in fact, I finally got tired of interviewing people solely because they had that experience, because it just became it's normal. It's not even an interesting story anymore. It's a cliche. Because the only thing worse than being a right-wing fascist Nazi white supremacist like me and you is being a former leftist or perceived or someone who at least was a fellow traveler, someone who was considered to be trustworthy and an okay guy.
Yeah, I was a capitalist, so they didn't trust me fully, right? They're all communists. Fact.
Which is kind of funny too, especially because the gamer world has a very strong, a very strong libertarian streak, I think.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what they want to change, right? This is like the gaming world is not for this. Most gamers, or people who play video games, I call them gamers, right? Are, I would say, competitive by nature. They love playing multiplayer games. They'll play Call of Duty. They want to kill the enemy, and they want to come out as the top, as number one. If they play single player games, they're playing stuff like Elden Ring, like Elon Musk talks about this game, right? Elden Ring, and it's like a really tough game. It's a game that if you quit, then you've lost. You have to keep trying, and you have to keep dying, and you learn from your experience. This is something that gamers have always had, and this is why people play video games. It's, like if you play chess and you're asking for the rules to be changed to chess, then maybe play something else, or don't play chess at all, right? Because the point of chess is to master it, is to become good at that game. And that's what gamers take pride in, they becoming good at something, skilled at something. That's why, a guy like Elon Musk, he's a gamer, right? He's all about challenging himself. And that's what I think a lot of gamers feel. But with the social justice streak, and I was actually there from the ground up, from when these people were coming up. They're now college professors. They're tenured college professors teaching media studies, in places like the University of Melbourne. I actually know a guy there who's like the head of the media studies group there. And he's a total leftist. I mean, they want to change the face of video games. They want to change what it means. So there's this push for games to be less competitive, to be more inclusive and diverse. That's the terms they use. But what they're really talking about is making uncompetitive video games, non-competitive games.
Another sort of cultural ideological trend that I would never have been aware of was, I'm sure Yang Ye.
Yeah.
Tremendously insightful guy. And to be really clear, I don't know a damn thing about gaming. Nothing. You might be my closest link to that world. And that's, I don't hang out all the time. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
But his stuff is an example of content that's so good that even if you're not really in that space, you want to listen to it. And I stumbled a couple of weeks ago on a video where he was talking about this battle of how crypto had invaded the gaming space. Yeah. And Microsoft had finally tossed out a certain amount of certain crypto features, we basically were people were turning games into opportunities, whether you say to grift or whether you say for free enterprise, but to seek rent, as we say in economics.
That's right. Yeah.
And his point of view was that's not what gaming is supposed to be about. It's one thing to say, again, they should be competitive, but another thing to say that people should be making bank on them. And the other point of view, apparently, which is typical of crypto heads, right, is everything and everyone is an opportunity to make bank.
To be commodified, right? Everything has to be commodified.
Video games need to be commodified.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it kind of, who even thought, unless you're in that space, that was one of that was one of the issues, that people were confronting. So it's fascinating to me. But what I also found about you is that they don't just call you names. There's also this theme out there that you're some kind of grifter. Now, like the word bot, the word grifter is more likely to be used utterly inaccurately.
Yep.
Than
how am I making money, right? That's my question.
That's
how
what
am I making money from this?
So
I don't even know. I wish I knew.
It's not grifting to use your fame or your influence to present to people the opportunity to support sponsors, or for you to get a job. I mean, I saw one reference where someone said, "Well, of course, he's always grifting, or he's always grifting. Look how we got paid by by Murdoch." That's called having a fucking job.
Yeah, it's called connecting to people. It's about networking.
What did that cost you? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, I'm not stealing from anyone. I mean, no one who does. Anyone in the industry who is anybody, anyone with any level of success, professional success, it's all about building those networking connections. It's about building relationships with people. It's about building a reputation. If people see that, I'm a cultural commentator, a political commentator, and they were to offer me a job to go work somewhere for them, for a news media agency or whatever, I'll take the job, obviously. I mean, who wouldn't, right? I mean, I'm simply leveraging my skill set to get what I want, and everybody does this. And otherwise, you can be happy working at a 9-to-5 job in a grocery store for the rest of your life. I mean, that's a lot of people, and they have no ambition. And for some reason, they feel envious of anyone who's made it to beyond that level to any extent.
Although, as you and I both know, you got twice as many followers as I do, which means you're making about twice as much money as I am from followers. Okay, which means you can go to the grocery store and buy something. Yeah. This is not really about the money. I mean, in my case, I'm very grateful that people, by virtue of my relative prominence on Twitter and virtually nowhere else, people want me to be their lawyer, and I'm very happy to have that opportunity. So that's a tremendous leverage for me, given the possible upside for litigation. But whether it's selling coffee or getting a journalism job. Now, you were with Will Chamberlain,
Human Events,
with Human Events. To me, okay, I know that Will has no patience whatsoever, and we know from people that he has that he jettisoned very early on. No names. Will is a straight arrow to a fault, arguably. I mean, he will literally jettison a relationship, a long running professional or even personal relationship with anyone he has no time for. Like, if you're a bullshitter, you're gone. That's it. And that's how he runs his life, basically. And it's a good way to go about things, because he's a very successful man. So it works. He's a good guy.
So he's a great guy.
How is it that you got to be one of the lucky people that Elon Musk decided to engage with on Twitter? Had there been a relationship before that?
Nope. No, none before. I would say, I would attribute it to my replies to him, the way I interact with him like a human being, and I would like to think, so at least he thinks so, I would like to think, insightful replies, right? Insightful commentary, things that are more than just, oh, here's a meme, Elon. A lot of people are posting memes at him, and he likes those, and he does interact with those, but it's more than that. It's more, and it's not yelling at the guy. A lot of people dehumanize him. They're like, "You're a billionaire. Do what I tell you to do," and he's got no patience for that. I don't think anyone have patience for that. If someone started entering your,
look, the
your
whole
replies,
way people interact with each other on Twitter is
insane.
a parody of human relations.
Yes, and for me, like personally, when someone reaches out to me on Twitter and they interact with me like a human being, like a normal person, I will interact back. And it's the same for Elon. It's the same for Elon, and he's a down-to-earth guy.
So that makes me want to ask you the question, because I don't want to go so far as to say you've gotten to know him, but you've certainly been a close observer now of what's going on, what he's doing. And as you said, you were in a space on the latest Twitter files release.
Yep.
And you and I had a little bit of an interaction on this a couple weeks ago. There's no question. The word, in fact, this morning is that I actually should have pulled up the tweet, but there's no question that the extent to which people thought that a new era of something much closer to being the free speech wing of the free speech movement has not been ushered in by Elon Musk, even though what he's done has been so radical, that just as you were thrown out, and told never to darken the door of the left again, here's a guy who far more than any social justice cred you ever had in the Gamergate era was a hero of not the far left, but of the soft liberal progressive world, is now equated on a regular. I mean, people were actually and have actually quit Twitter because so these changes took place. I recognize them, but there's been he hasn't addressed shadow banning. He hasn't
addressed that yet. It's because it's a very difficult problem to tackle, right? It's baked right into Twitter.
Clearly.
Yeah. I've interacted with him about this specific issue, and it is being worked on. It is a work in progress, much like a lot of things on Twitter are a work in progress. I can confidently say that it will be dealt with, maybe not in the immediate future, but definitely in the future, right? And this is it is crucial that he deals with it for Twitter to be a profitable platform. So he took a platform, Twitter, he bought a crime scene, but he also bought a business that was dying. It was on the way down. They had too many employees who were not doing anything, not benefiting the company in any way whatsoever. They were just bleeding money month by month by month, tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions a month. Now, he has taken more than $44 billion to try to fix this company. He bought it for $44 billion, and then he spent an additional $5 or $6 billion by selling Tesla stock in order to prop it up and to ensure that it will at least survive for the next 1 or 2 years without a steady stream of revenue. The money that he's making right now from Twitter, it's not much, right? But it's definitely it's not bleeding quite as much. Maybe it's not making a profit, but it's not dying at the very least, and he's stopped the bleeding. And the way forward, the path forward, is to turn Twitter into a profitable business venture, which would mean implementing monetization systems, allowing content creators to monetize it the way that Twitch or YouTube does, with super chats, things like that. That's, obviously in the works. He's been talking to YouTubers about this stuff. So that's all being developed. And going back to, circling back to the shadow banning issue, I would say that that is in the pipeline. It has to be, because in order for Twitter to be financially successful, there has to be trust in the platform. Right. And it was this great article.
And that means both algorithm and transparent procedures.
That's right. Yeah. TAAS, right? That's what Elon calls it, a transparency as a service. And that is what, or trust as a service, I think. Whichever. Good. Yeah, and he wants Twitter to be a place where you can trust them to do the right thing, to trust them to not lie to you, and to tell you why you're shadow banned, or if you're banned, or whatever the deal is with your account. You have to be able to know what's going on and how to remedy it. Otherwise, it's like much like setting up a kangaroo court where everything's a crapshoot. It's a landmine everywhere. Laser trip mines here and there. And that's most social media platforms. You can get banned for no reason on Facebook. You have no idea.
I'm astonished, right? And I've had so many people come to me who had storefronts on Facebook, who just had the rug pulled out from under them, and that's just it. And these and it's amazing to me. And I think the lawyers aren't necessarily attacking it the way that they might, but judges defer to social media platforms as if the commercial relationships that they have with human beings who are their customers, their users, or their product, no matter how you describe those people, they are not, as many judges and lawyers and commentators and law professors think, utterly lacking in recognized legal rights, much less moral ones. But I'm astonished as I got in my head more into the YouTube world at how major content producers, gamers, and people with 3, 4, 5 million subscribers are, last week apparently YouTube rolled out a whole set of new content moderation.
They can be demonetized for cursing in the first 15 seconds or so. It is ridiculous because it destroys
people who complained. The response by Google was, first of all, inevitably the so-called manual appeals are not manual appeals at all.
They're not. Yeah, automated.
And they then do a look back check on your past content that had not been flagged. And people are having videos from 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago demonetized.
That's right.
That's not good policy. And I don't believe anything in the DMCA or Section 230 ever contemplated that you can induce someone to come onto a platform, deliver value to you, and rationalize. Because you read this in the article that Will and I wrote, of course, for Human Events years ago.
Of course.
But be our customer, give us content, help us promote, help us bring other people onto all these things, get engagement going. But anytime we or some algorithm or some purple-haired 23-year-old you cross the line with any of these phenomena, and we can completely disconnect you and we have no responsible to answer. But
there's no
I
recourse.
don't have to convince you of that. But I'm just amazed that the ecosystem, because Twitter has never.
I got banned on PayPal. Zero recourse. I called them up and they're rude to me. They're like, you know what you did. We can't tell you what you did wrong, but you know what you did. Literally word for word what the guy said. Like, he enjoyed saying it to me. I wish I had a recording for that. But
bastards.
They are, yeah. They rub it in your face.
So here's a guy who knows this all very, very well and gets it. And whatever people say about Elon, and I'm amazed that there's if it weren't for Elon Musk, you'd have had to invent him, because there's no one who's more hated on YouTube than Elon Musk.
Even gaming YouTubers that I follow will randomly trash the guy. And it's like, guys, a year ago you were praising him. You were saying he's a genius. He's a Leonardo da Vinci of our times. And I agree that's probably the case. And yet now, because the meme is to hate Elon Musk, he's worse than Hitler.
So your take, though, is that, this has been my take as well, but I've been frustrated. I've been frustrated by, well, first of all, I can't really tag him because we're still suing Twitter in the DC Drano case.
Yep.
And that's another question, but I don't think you're any more capable of answering than I am. I think, and I imagine if I were a successful executive, much less an extremely successful executive, but the Tesla stock price went way down. Yeah, that I'm sure it's all because of Twitter, right? I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that all the other things, including Guess what? Tesla's always been kind of kind of an exaggerated success story anyway.
Sure.
Listen, whatever. My point is, and I do have one, that if I were a successful executive, I would obviously have a set of priorities. And, I get these DMs from people all the time who want my help in restoring banned accounts, which
I get so many of those.
I can seldom offer, especially because of this problem with my addressing Elon Musk, despite being, and the fact that I'm literally having, my follower count reduced on a daily basis. I can live with that. But I will say that one thing that was really weird, and I absolutely believe they baked this in. November was a golden age of Twitter. Yes. It was so fun. The engagement was phenomenal. And I was gaining 1,000 followers a week, as I should have been for the previous 5 years. Why?
Absolutely.
Because I'm that good. I'm really good at Twitter.
Yes, you are. And you're being throttled by the algorithm. I would say my own success, on Twitter, right? Not anywhere else, but on Twitter in regards to that is I have been growing by 1,000 a day. And I can attribute that only to Elon Musk responding to every other one of my tweets, right? He will respond to me at least once a day. So that's cool.
That's fantastic.
It's only in spite. So it's growing in spite of everything else, though, because I am still shadow banned. That's the funny thing.
No, that's right. No, the fact is, I might still be adding 1,000, but they're actually taking away.
Yeah.
And look, I know that there's culling, and I know that there's garbage, but listen.
It wouldn't be like this. It would be so blatant.
So I believe that is, Ron Coleman not being able to get to 300,000 as fast as he wants isn't really a super duper big problem.
Yeah.
Moreover, I think again, not being a techie and not really understanding although my brother has explained, my brother who is a software engineer and very knowledgeable about the cloud, has explained to me a lot about how distributed network systems work and why often things don't, it's not like just you and your PC. There's gazillion PC. There's a gazillion
many
networks
networks.
Out there.
There's a slow pipe. There's a fast pipe. Multiple statistical engines. I mean, Elon even went into detail about this in a recent space where he was talking to one of Twitter's newly hired Twitter interns, an engineer named George Hotz. He's perhaps best known for being the guy who hacked the PlayStation or the Apple iPhone. He cracked the code without having the code. I mean, the guy's brilliant, right? And they were going over Twitter systems, and they came to the conclusion that Twitter is simply burdened with way too many different code bases. It's not just a single program running a single thing, right? I mean, normally if you create a program, it's just the one thing, right? And if you're developing, say, a piece of software that is more complicated, then maybe you're running, a single big program with several other subroutines or whatever, right? Sets of programming or maybe there's a graphics engine, maybe there is an engine for the user interface, maybe there's an engine for sound, right? Different engines that are operating in tandem to produce a single cohesive product, say for a video game. With Twitter, they have multiple layers of this stuff, different code bases, different languages written on different servers, different architecture, different locations, even one in, say one will be in San Diego, the other one's in a different state in Texas.
In other words, it was not managed very well.
No, it's run very poorly, and it's up to these new engineers that they hired to disentangle all of this stuff to make sure that it's very streamlined. And that's why there's some downtime recently where they literally shut down a whole network of servers, realizing that they were just paying money for this backup that wasn't actually doing anything for the site. It was making it slower because of the way the network was routed through the code, or the code was routed through the network. It was going through the slower system instead of the faster system that was developed later on. It was a very poorly run company, right? That's the issue with diversity hires to the previous Twitter. They didn't get people for their ability, right? They got them because of whatever reasons. And And now Elon's cleaning things up. This is where his focus is in at the moment, is to basically rebuild Twitter from, maybe not from scratch, but to create a clean process, one that's not running 10 different code bases, one that just runs a single one.
I mean, my understanding was that a lot of the accounts that people thought should be immediately restored wasn't just a matter of flipping a switch. These things were, they were booby trapped, and they were, there was all kinds of gunky code around the banning.
Like why they got banned, right? It was algorithmic. If the ban wasn't, directly made by someone, say a moderator, that could be easily flagged. You'd be like, oh, that ban was a mistake, unflag it, it's not banned anymore. But these accounts were banned algorithmically, tied to certain keywords, to certain campaigns of banning that they were doing, like when they were going after the so-called Russian disinformation bots, which all turned out to be Americans, not Russians. There were no Russian bots at all, as we've seen in the latest Twitter files. When they were banning these people, I imagine that they simply installed a code to start banning these accounts. And so if you were banned in those one of those batches, it'd be a lot more difficult to simply unban you. Because that code is still there. That code that caused you to be banned is still in place. So even if they unflag it, you might get banned, immediately after.
It's complicated stuff. So am I are we just Elon Musk simps? Listen, he has really put so much.
We respect the man. We respect the man for doing what he does, right? I don't think that makes you a simp. I think it's recognizing what he has done for the space, for free speech, and he's got skin in the game. He's not just a commentator who's saying, here's what we need to do. He's like, here's $44 billion and here's $6 billion more because I want to fix the system.
I heard somebody say to me yesterday that the problem with Elon Musk, that this non-multi-billionaire, that notwithstanding his obvious business talents, he is impulsive, and he made this Twitter purchase, and thereby distracted himself from Tesla. And you see what impulsivity. He says, wait a minute, and this sounds a lot like a Trump argument that I remember from a few years ago. You're telling me that he's such a bad manager that the reason Tesla has been having trouble is that he's not managing enough at Tesla. Which is it? Is he impulsive and inconsistent, in which case his getting away from Tesla should be a great thing? Or is it that something else? It's kind of like when people were saying, we need Trump back no matter what, because he's the only one who can undo what he's done. Or what happened when he was president. I said, well, is Trump an idiot?
Why would you want? Why would you want the guy who caused the problems in the first place to fix it? That makes no sense, right? It's contradictory. And with Elon Musk, I mean, look, I can say personally, and he has told me this, right, that buying Twitter was not an impulse decision. It was something that he had arrived at after a long time of thinking. It was something. There's no such thing
as a $40 billion impulse decision.
No.
I don't care who you are. I don't care if you have the money sitting in bullion. You cannot make a decision like that on impulse. There's simply as a lawyer,
too many processes.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen.
And he has to get money from stockholders and people he owes money to, banks, right? He has to loan the money. It's not like he's got $40 billion just sitting there. So it's a whole process of it. And even if he did have that money, it's not something anyone would do. No way. It's not like, buying a piece of candy and eating it.
See, my problem is that notwithstanding my frustration with how certain things are coming and going, and the take that I had in November is still the accurate take, which is that his purchase of Twitter was of historic cultural and political proportions. And anyone who doesn't recognize that, even if nothing else changed from where we are right now, is simply just trying to be that guy, just trying to be that naysayer, someone who knows better. It's phenomenal. When has someone put so much of a personal fortune into something that may or may not be profitable? Because I agree with you. I always said that if Twitter were run right, it surely would be making money.
Yes.
But if you look at the list of, if you look at all the things that the social justice people put in to prevent anything even remotely looking like a free market of ideas of communication, of course it couldn't be.
Yeah.
It's no more capable of turning a profit than Harvard is.
Yeah.
But without the patents, because that's where all these universities.
That's where their money comes in. Yeah.
Believe it or not, we have used up more than our allotted time. Ian, I'm so glad we did this, and I think we got to do it again.
Oh, absolutely, I'm down. There's a lot to talk about.
Yes, there
Likewise.
is. No, maybe we should have a regular feature.
Yeah,
Thanks again. We will be in touch. All the best.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.